Welcome to Celestial Zodiac. Today we're exploring Saturn retrograde through the lens of astrological house placement and what it reveals about where your structure is being recalibrated. Saturn retrograde is often misunderstood as restriction, punishment, or karmic consequence. But beneath the surface, it represents something far more constructive. It is a cycle of internal accountability. A period when authority turns inward, foundations are examined, and maturity deepens before it solidifies outwardly. Saturn governs structure, responsibility, discipline, time, boundaries, commitment, and long-term reality. It rules how you build your life, and how you sustain what you build. Where Jupiter expands, Saturn stabilizes. Where Jupiter inspires, Saturn defines. When Saturn turns retrograde, external pressure may soften, but internal pressure increases. The outer authority quiets and the inner authority becomes louder. You may reassess commitments. You may question inherited rules. You may feel called to restructure something that no longer feels aligned with who you are becoming. Retrograde is not punishment, it is refinement. It is not collapse, it is consolidation. If zodiac signs describe how Saturn structures, houses reveal where that structure is being reviewed. The house placement shows which life department is undergoing architectural revision, where boundaries are maturing, where responsibilities are being redefined, and where long-term foundations are being strengthened from the inside out. This applies whether Saturn is retrograde in your natal chart or currently transiting through a house. In both cases, that house highlights where you are becoming your own authority, where discipline becomes self-directed rather than externally imposed. Saturn retrograde asks a quiet but powerful question. What are you building, and is it built on truth? Let's begin with the first house. The first house governs identity, physical presence, and how you approach life. It represents the structure of the self, the way you define who you are and how you move through the world. When Saturn moves retrograde in the first house, identity turns inward. You may reassess how you carry yourself, how you define your role, or whether your current self-concept is built on external expectations rather than internal truth. Confidence becomes less performative and more foundational. Psychologically, this placement invites you to examine your inner authority. Are you living from self-trust, or from self-criticism? Saturn retrograde here refines the architecture of identity. It asks whether the persona you project is sustainable. In real life, this could show up as pulling back from visibility, reevaluating personal goals, or redefining how you introduce yourself. This is not insecurity, it is reconstruction. The first house under Saturn retrograde strengthens authentic self-governance. Next, the second house governs money, material resources, stability, and self-value. It represents how you build security and what you believe you deserve. When Saturn moves retrograde in the second house, financial structure becomes internalized. You may reassess spending habits, income stability, or long-term security plans. External growth may slow, but internal standards sharpen. Psychologically, this placement recalibrates self-worth. Saturn retrograde here asks whether your sense of value is built on external productivity or intrinsic worth. It can surface fears around scarcity, but not to punish you, to strengthen sustainability. In real life, this may show up as tightening budgets, restructuring financial plans, or confronting limiting beliefs about money. This isn't loss, it's stabilization. The second house under Saturn retrograde strengthens long-term financial maturity. Next is the third house of communication and mental discipline. The third house governs communication, daily interactions, siblings, and mental processing. It represents how you think, speak, and organize information. When Saturn moves retrograde in the third house, communication slows and becomes more deliberate. You may revisit past conversations, refine messaging, or question habitual thought patterns. Psychologically, this placement emphasizes mental discipline. Saturn retrograde here asks whether your thinking is structured or reactive. It may bring awareness to self-critical inner dialogue or inherited narratives that shape how you interpret daily life. In real life, this could show up as revising writing projects, reorganizing schedules, reassessing local commitments, or becoming more intentional with speech. This is not intellectual suppression. It is cognitive refinement. The third house under Saturn retrograde strengthens mature communication. Next is the fourth house. The fourth house governs home, family, roots, ancestry, and emotional security. It represents your psychological foundation, the structure beneath your visible life. When Saturn moves retrograde in the fourth house, attention turns inward toward emotional architecture. Family dynamics, inherited responsibilities, or early conditioning may require review. You may question which emotional burdens are truly yours, and which were absorbed from your environment. Psychologically, this placement invites deep restructuring of internal security. Saturn retrograde here asks whether your foundation is built on fear, duty, or authentic stability. In real life, this could show up as redefining family boundaries, restructuring living arrangements, or confronting unresolved emotional patterns. It can feel serious, but it is strengthening. This isn't isolation, it's consolidation. The fourth house under Saturn retrograde strengthens emotional sovereignty. Next is the fifth house. The fifth house governs creativity, romance, joy, self-expression, and what you create from the heart. It represents how you experience pleasure and how confidently you allow yourself to be seen. When Saturn moves retrograde in the fifth house, creative expression becomes more serious and intentional. You may reassess how you seek validation, how you express affection, or whether your creative pursuits are aligned with long-term fulfillment. Psychologically, this placement invites maturity around joy. Saturn retrograde here asks whether you allow yourself pleasure freely, or only when it feels earned. It may surface fears around visibility, vulnerability, or being judged for self-expression. Romantic patterns may also come under review. Are you choosing partners from insecurity or self-respect? In real life, this could show up as restructuring creative projects, redefining dating standards, or taking hobbies more seriously. This is not suppression of joy, it is refinement of it. The fifth house under Saturn retrograde strengthens disciplined creativity and mature self-expression. Next is the sixth house. The sixth house governs work routines, health, service, productivity, and daily systems. It represents how you manage responsibilities and maintain order in everyday life. When Saturn moves retrograde in the sixth house, routines and obligations undergo review. You may feel called to restructure work habits, address health discipline, or reassess how much responsibility you are carrying. Psychologically, this placement highlights self-management. Saturn retrograde here asks whether your daily systems support your long-term stability, or quietly deplete you. It can bring awareness to overwork, perfectionism, or avoidance patterns that undermine consistency. In real life, this may show up as adjusting schedules, implementing stricter boundaries at work, committing to health routines, or reevaluating service roles. This is not burnout, it is recalibration. The sixth house under Saturn retrograde strengthens sustainable discipline. Next is the 7th house of partnerships and contractual commitments. The 7th house governs long-term partnerships, marriage, business contracts, and one-to-one dynamics. It represents how you relate to equals and how you structure commitment. When Saturn moves retrograde in the 7th house, relationship dynamics undergo internal review. You may reassess boundaries, expectations, or the balance of responsibility within partnerships. Psychologically, this placement invites maturity in how you relate. Saturn retrograde here asks whether your commitments are built on obligation or conscious choice. It can highlight patterns of over-responsibility, avoidance of accountability, or fear of vulnerability. You may begin questioning, are these agreements sustainable? Are roles clearly defined? Is there mutual effort? In real life, this could show up as redefining relationship boundaries, renegotiating contracts, or becoming more intentional about who you commit to. This is not relational collapse. It is structural clarity. The 7th house under Saturn retrograde strengthens mature partnership. Let's move on to the 8th house. The 8th house governs shared finances, debt, intimacy, power dynamics, inheritance, and deep psychological transformation. It represents what is shared, merged, or emotionally entangled. When Saturn moves retrograde in the 8th house, shared structures are examined. Financial obligations, emotional dependencies, and power imbalances may require restructuring. Psychologically, this placement invites accountability around trust and vulnerability. Saturn retrograde here asks, where do you overextend? Where do you avoid depth? Where do you give away power, or hold too tightly to it? It can bring awareness to financial entanglements, unresolved emotional contracts, or fears around loss and control. But this awareness is stabilizing, not destructive. In real life, this could show up as restructuring debt, clarifying shared assets, setting stronger emotional boundaries, or confronting deeper fears around intimacy. This isn't crisis, it's consolidation. The 8th house under Saturn retrograde strengthens psychological resilience and responsible merging. Next is the 9th house. The 9th house governs higher education, philosophy, spirituality, legal matters, publishing, travel, and long-range vision. It represents the framework through which you interpret meaning. When Saturn moves retrograde in the 9th house, belief systems are tested internally. You may reassess long-held philosophies, question teachers or institutions, or refine your moral compass. Psychologically, this placement invites intellectual responsibility. Saturn retrograde here asks whether your worldview is grounded in lived experience or borrowed authority. Faith becomes disciplined rather than blind. Perspective becomes structured rather than idealistic. In real life, this may show up as revisiting educational goals, rethinking spiritual commitments, or restructuring long-term plans. Can feel sobering, but it strengthens conviction. This isn't loss of faith, it's maturation of it. The 9th house under Saturn retrograde strengthens grounded wisdom. Next is the 10th house. The 10th house governs career, reputation, leadership, authority, and long-term achievement. It represents your public role and the legacy you are building over time. When Saturn moves retrograde in the 10th house, professional structures undergo internal review. You may reassess career direction, leadership responsibilities, or whether your public image reflects your authentic authority. Psychologically, this placement invites examination of ambition. Saturn retrograde here asks, are you pursuing success out of fear or purpose? Are you carrying responsibilities that are truly yours, or inherited expectations? External recognition may feel quieter during this cycle, but internal standards become clearer. You may redefine what success actually means to you. In real life, this could show up as restructuring career goals, stepping back from leadership roles temporarily, or refining long-term plans. This is not professional failure. It is strategic recalibration. The 10th house under Saturn retrograde strengthens sustainable authority and long-term credibility. We move along to the 11th house. The 11th house governs friendships, social networks, collective movements, and long-range aspirations. It represents your role within the larger community and the future you are working toward. When Saturn moves retrograde in the 11th house, group dynamics and future visions are reassessed. You may question your place within communities, reevaluate long-term goals, or reconsider alliances. Psychologically, this placement invites maturity in belonging. Saturn retrograde here asks, are your friendships reciprocal? Is your vision realistic and grounded? Are you aligned with the communities you invest in? It may surface feelings of social distance, but that distance clarifies who and what is sustainable. In real life, this could show up as redefining friendships, setting stronger boundaries within groups, or restructuring long-term aspirations. This is not isolation, it is alignment. The 11th house under Saturn retrograde strengthens purposeful community involvement. Lastly is the 12th house of subconscious patterns and inner accountability. The 12th house governs the subconscious, hidden fears, spiritual retreat, solitude, and karmic patterns. It represents what operates beneath conscious awareness. When Saturn moves retrograde in the 12th house, internal structures that have gone unexamined come into focus. Old fears, suppressed responsibilities, or unresolved guilt may surface for restructuring. Psychologically, this placement invites deep inner accountability. Saturn retrograde here asks, what patterns are you unconsciously repeating? Where are you avoiding responsibility internally? What emotional burdens are ready to be released? This can feel introspective and serious, but it is profoundly stabilizing. The work here is private, subtle, and foundational. In real life, this may show up as increased need for solitude, therapy work, spiritual discipline, or confronting long-standing patterns. This is not isolation, it is preparation. The 12th house under Saturn retrograde strengthens inner sovereignty and spiritual maturity. As you reflect on where Saturn retrograde is operating in your chart, consider not just the house itself, but the type of house it occupies. In angular houses, the 1st, 4th, 7th, and 10th, the restructuring tends to feel more visible. These houses govern identity, home, relationships, and career. When Saturn retrogrades here, shifts in responsibility and authority may become noticeable in your core life structures. You may reassess your role within a relationship, redefine your career trajectory, reconstruct your sense of identity, or reevaluate the foundations of your home life. Because angular houses initiate action, Saturn retrograde here can feel externally consequential, but its true work is internal. It is asking you to step into greater self-governance in the most visible areas of your life. In succeeding houses, the 2nd, 5th, 8th, and 11th, the focus turns to stabilization and sustainability. These houses govern resources, creativity, shared assets, and long-term aspirations. Saturn retrograde here strengthens foundations. You may review financial commitments, refine creative discipline, restructure shared obligations, or reconsider future goals and alliances. This is less about dramatic change and more about reinforcement. Saturn retrograde in succeedent houses asks, is this sustainable long-term? Are you building something that can endure? In cadent houses, the 3rd, 6th, 9th, and 12th, the restructuring becomes quieter and deeply internal. These houses govern communication, daily systems, belief frameworks, and subconscious patterns. Here, Saturn retrograde refines mental discipline, restructures routines, matures philosophy, and brings hidden fears into conscious accountability. The work may not be immediately visible, but it is foundational. Habits shift. Thought patterns mature. Beliefs become grounded. Unconscious burdens are examined. Saturn retrograde does not punish, it prepares. It does not remove stability, it strengthens it from within. The house reveals where responsibility becomes self-directed, where boundaries mature, and where long-term structures are reinforced before visible progress resumes. Thank you for watching Celestial Zodiac. If this Saturn retrograde breakdown resonated with you, subscribe for more in-depth planetary insights, house placements, and grounded astrology analysis. Until next time, keep building, keep refining, and let your foundations strengthen with the cycles.